Hello and welcome to Biofilm Podcast, a show that brings you to the forefront of biomedical research, biotech, pharma, and healthcare fields, and the professionals behind it. I'm your host, Pavel Rajov. In the episode 4 of Biofilm Podcast, I welcome a very special guest, Professor Chandan Singh. First, he was one of my lab colleagues at SPP Medical Discovery Institute, where we worked together for 2 years, struggling with membrane protein sample preparation, negotiating NMR instrument time, and having constant discussions about all things science. However, he is also special because of his determination and the resulting accomplishments, coming from a small village in India to his undergraduate and graduate work in one of the most prestigious universities there, to his postdoctoral stints at MIT and in San Diego, where we met. Now he is an assistant professor in the Department of Biochemistry of Banaras Hindu University in his hometown. To tell us all about his passion for academic research, his work on bone structure, and whether he will do another PhD, here's Chandan Singh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pavel, for inviting me to this podcast. It's always nice to talk to you.
Yes, I could not agree more. So before we get started and dive deep into your scientific journey, Chandan, since it's a biofilm podcast, I like to ask my guests about a recent movie that they watched. I already know that you're a big fan of movies and watched them avidly. In fact, we've watched a number of movies together. However, in a bit of a deviation, given a recent passing of a Bollywood icon, Irfan Khan, I wanted to ask, what was your favorite movie with him and why?
That's a very nice point. In fact, he was one of the best actors we have seen in long time in Bollywood, and people like it to call it Indian movie industry and whatever, and people prefer. But he has given a lot of very nice performances. So one of my recent favorites was his release, I think, in 1 or 2 years before, Kareeb Kareeb Single. It means almost single in English, and that was a very nice romantic comedy. And he just naturally in his performances, so I like that a lot.
Have you seen Life of Pi? I think he was in that movie too.
Yeah, I have seen Life of Pi, and he was in Jurassic Park also. So since you asked me an Indian movie, so that was my favorite one.
Okay.
With songs and everything, you know.
So am I correct in understanding that he was a big actor in India?
Yeah, so there are stars and there are actors. So people have their preferences. So people are changing their interest in movies, the kind of movies they want to watch, or the kind of actors they like. So he was one of the actors who was liked for being a good actor, right, rather than being a star.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you feel like your movie preferences have changed throughout your professional life, and were any of the times that you were say in America versus in India, like how much did that influence your choice of movies that you wanted to watch?
Choice of movies did not change a lot from my PhD time. In fact, from the time I started my PhD, it has been almost constant. I can watch diverse range of movies. It has changed from when I was young then. So when I was young, I used to watch typical action movies, but it has changed a lot from then.
Okay, so now this is a perfect opportunity to jump into the journey that I've just prefaced in the introduction. So since, like yourself, I'm also a trained NMR spectroscopist, I have to ask you point blank, which one do you prefer, solution NMR or solid state NMR? And before you answer, I guess, can you give us a little bit of introduction into what NMR is and how did you learn first about it?
So NMR is basically a technique which gives you, in a very broad sense, it gives you opportunity to look into microworld in their absolute native states without tempering too much. So like if you want to look small molecules, you can just put a serum sample inside the NMR tube. You don't have to treat with anything, and you can have a profile of small molecules within serum. You can have their concentrations, and that helps you to get details of patient condition and those kind of things. For protein molecules, we can study structure, dynamics, and all different kind of details. So basically, it's like a magic wand which allows you to see the microworld, at atomic scale. So you can get site-specific information. And my first introduction to NMR was accidental. Basically, I was doing a project on a plant-based. I was doing a plant-based project on. I think I was cloning some rice genes, stress tolerance rice gene, in Delhi, and one of my friends, he was doing project work in Lucknow with my supervisor. So he told me that they have an interesting opening for PhD position.
So, in your PhD work, which is where you first really had ample opportunity to go into the NMR spectroscopy, you did work in terms of bone structure and composition. So, can you tell us a little bit about that experience of trying to use this new technique and going into this very, I guess, very complex structure from the structural point of view, this complex system of bone, and what was the challenges that you were trying to address in that research?
So uh, when I joined that lab, basically that lab had a project based on, I think, A2A receptor, which is adenosine receptor. So the original project where I joined was based on membrane protein. But due to some reasons, it took a long time for us to procure our first purification system.
Well, yeah, membrane proteins. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, we could not procure the machine. Like we were targeting a purifier to buy that,
Mhm.
and although we had the money, the government system worked like that. That it took some time when we could get our purification system purchased. So I could not sit down idle. So my senior Ratan, he was working on this project where they were studying uh, organic part of the collagen. Basically, I can give a brief introduction. So bone is the biomaterial, and it has two broad components. In organic part, which has calcium hydroxyapatite minerals, and then organic part, which is composed more than 90% by type 1 collagen. So if you record any carbon 13 spectrum, you will get signal mainly from collagen because that's forming major component of the organic part. And inorganic part, you will not see any carbon signal because most of them are like calcium hydroxide and sodium and all those things. So I had seen Ratan quite busy on that project, and I think we had our first paper when I just joined the lab. So basically, my boss kind of in the beginning trapped me in that project, saying that collagen is a protein and you are interested in working on protein. So so I said, okay, that sounds good. uh,
Yeah, I
but
could accept that logic.
yeah, I mean, and that was fun. Like later on I realized that was fun working on. So basically the exciting part of that project was you can just take a piece of cortical bone, pack inside the router, spin it at high spinning. Like you know that in order to study uh, in order to do solid state NMR, we need to spin either we can do static NMR or we can spin the sample. So we used to spin the bone at 10 kilohertz, and spinning itself was a big challenge because you pack the rotor inside, you pack the bone inside 3.2 rotor, and then you put that for spinning. So the biggest challenge was spinning the bone. So then one of the challenges was to cut the bone in that shape of 3.2 rotor. That was one of the biggest challenge, and I became
Yeah,
really good expert in that.
yeah.
So and later on, it was very nice journey. Like I think I was the person who first recorded nitrogen 15 signal in natural abundance and studied the basically relaxation time for the backbone of the collagen. And uh, then I was the person who standardized how to preserve bone samples because a lot of groups started working on bone samples
So
and
is I
started
would
using.
say, is this just for NMR applications or just in general?
So uh, study of bones or collagen protein inside bone by NMR was not that common long back, and it's started recently. I think when I started working on bone, it was only duration of 3 or 4 years when it started happening again. A lot
Mhm.
of people started using NMR solid state NMR to study bone samples, especially both organic and inorganic parts. So a lot of studies were coming out, but no one had optimized the preservation conditions. So what I did, I mean, for when I started looking for the literature, I have seen that people who do traditional um, micro CT measurements, they have optimized how to preserve bones and everything. But I decided to look for the NMR parameters and their changes with respect to conditions where you are storing those bone samples, in case if you want to store them for longer time, or if you want to transport those samples. So that study I performed, I basically preserved at different conditions and measured relaxation parameters and the collagen 13C NMR to see the collagen structure and all those things. So that study was done. It was published in Solid State NMR, which is basically journal of representative journal for solid state NMR. It's not very high impact, but it's good journal. So overall, it was fun. Basically, it was fun.
So if I didn't know anything about you at the time, and I was like one of your friends and that had very little knowledge of science, how was your conversation with people that you came across during that time when you were explaining what you were doing? Like you were explaining, oh, I'm essentially cutting bones and trying to study them. What was the reaction like from the people?
Yeah, so I mean, science. It was hard to explain to people in science also. Like,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Because I mean, so people used to laugh because we use goat bones. So sometimes we would just buy the meat.
Okay, what are the bad bones? I'm curious.
No, not good bones, goat bones.
Oh, goat bones. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and where I think to common people, they used to wonder what we are doing with those bone samples.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that would be the first question. Like, how come? Like, what are you doing with them?
And the places from where we procured, they were worried that are we doing some quality control, or are we doing some kind of testing? Yeah. Are we going to harm them or something like that?
Yeah.
So that was reaction of common people, and yeah.
So I was going to ask, so at the end of your PhD, you're coming off the heels of this, a lot of body of work based on just your publication history alone. So you're entering this new phase. Like what was going through your mind at the time? Like what were your goals that you were setting out for yourself that you needed to accomplish? And this is sort of, I will come back to that point because one of the things I really admire you is your strategic thinking and sort of having a plan and a backup plan and all those things. And when did it really start for you to solidify in terms of what you want to accomplish in life? Was it sometime at the end of your PhD?
So PhD was fun till third year, and around fourth year, when I was coming towards end of my PhD, I started thinking where I want to be. And you have to be really open in terms of your thinking process and what you want in next 5 years or something like that. And as you may be aware that in academics, there are not that many positions. So I started thinking about that really early in my career. So then, I mean, at one time I decided, okay, I will not go in academics. I will go in industry because there are not many jobs and it's so much struggle. And what we don't realize as scientists, whether we are young scientists or old, I mean, we don't think in terms of time, in terms of, we don't plan in terms of years. We plan in terms of 5 years or in terms of 10 years, which is not a very good thinking. You have to plan, I mean, you have to keep on thinking. Just when you finish your PhD, you have to think in terms of 1 year or 2 year plan. So I was really confused, like everyone else. Like you are confused right now. I was really confused. What should I do next? So I even applied in a pharma company, big pharma company. I got the position, and then I was in constant argument or discussion with my boss that he asked me, what you want to do? I said, I don't want to do postdoc. I want to go to industry.
Yes.
So I talked to people who were in industry. Like I was blessed in having seniors who were really open in what you were. I asked. So I asked a couple of seniors who were working in the industry, and I mean they told me that okay, you can always come back to industry, but have some year of some exposure in postdoc so that you can go to your academics jobs. And if you don't go to postdoc, you kind of close your options for academics. So I was trying to be clever with this pharma company. When I got the offer, I asked them, can you guarantee me to send for industrial postdoc? And can you give me a signed letter? And they said, no, we will think after 5 years. I said, thank you very much. I have got a position in MIT and I am living here,
Yeah.
So I like teaching. Basically, I like teaching and I like research. So first priority was always academics, but I wanted to be realistic.
Yeah. So this is a perfect segue that into the next step that you've taken, which is this MIT position. So how did this happen? Because essentially you're now finishing the PhD in India, and I'm assuming that a lot of people that were in your shoes who would want to go, for example, to the US to take a postdoc position. That's probably a steep competition, but also it's challenging on so many different levels, culturally, financially, academically, even like in terms of securing these prestigious types of positions. How did you accomplish that?
So when I was looking for postdoc, one thing I was clear about, like, I did not want to continue my PhD work in my postdoc. I wanted to add, keeping NMR as my key technique, I wanted to add expertise in different area than my PhD work. So I chose to change my field of research. And the way it works, like you keep on applying and then you go for the interviews. If you get the reply, and it takes like, I think it takes 50 emails to get reply from two, 3 people, as you have experienced.
Yes.
So, and one thing I was really good about, I was following the kind of people um, I wanted to work with. So I was following research of Professor Mihong in MIT from long time, and so that helped when I discussed when I got the opportunity of like when she interviewed me, I could discuss all the work which was being done, and I have followed that work for a long time. So basically, I was not targeting MIT, I was targeting her lab. So, or the kind of research I wanted to do. So most of the positions where I applied, I was already following from, I think, second year of my PhD. I was following most of work in NMR, in biological NMR,
Right.
because it's a small field. So you can count people on fingers, like who is working on what field.
Yeah.
So that's easy to keep track of.
So in the work that you've done at MIT, what was maybe the most important cultural thing that you have experienced when coming into that position, as well as what was the professional takeaway that sort of helped you to essentially improve on what you already knew as a PhD student?
So I mean, you face totally different problems. Like here, wherever you are in your country or where you have done your PhD, you are in a comfort zone, and you will be surprised. The biggest problem is housing. you know,
Oh
I
wow, that's true. I guess,
mean,
yeah.
I mean, if you go to Boston, it took me 2 or 3 months to get my own apartment, or so that was biggest
Wow.
problem, and I took that lightly. But I think a lot of time went, and time and effort went in finding proper housing. So that takes your mind off from your research for a while. So
Yeah.
that was first. Then definitely weather. It's like coming from coming from the place which has plenty of sunlight, and it's basically hot temperature and everything else. You go to Boston, where it's very charming to see the snowfall from long distance. So
Yes.
it's when when it happens for the first time, you enjoy it, you go outside, you feel it, but then it becomes a pain.
Yeah.
And uh, in long time you realize that you're not happy. Basically,
Mhm.
it's a challenge to be in those places,
Yeah.
especially if you come from the place which has plenty of sunlight. So that was bigger challenge. I liked most of the things in the lab, although I totally changed my field. uh, I struggled, but I learned a lot. Like you can learn a lot from those places. People work really hard, really hard.
So what's the biggest advantage of working hard? I mean, because I know you worked, when we worked together, you worked super hard for many months, especially closer to the end of your time in our lab. So
Yeah.
would you say that there is no shortcuts in terms of, getting the results that you want? Working hard pays off.
Yeah, I mean that is one thing I have uh, realized over like in long time, that you can take the benefit of shortcuts only if you have worked hard for a long time. So like if you have worked for 1 or 2 years, work hard, you know everything about that system, then only you can take benefit of those shortcuts or things you notice, like small things you notice in your experiments, which
Yeah.
will be unnoticed if you have not worked hard.
Yeah.
So until you know the system really well, it will be difficult to notice those shortcuts which you can take later.
Yeah. So speaking of working hard, and given the fact that we're trained in this sort of niche environment,
Mhm.
the existential question that I sometimes struggle with is a question of what's better, being a specialist or being a generalist in terms of specifically profession that we chose.
So it totally depends again where you want to go, and I think it's not difficult. Uh, I think being a specialist puts you in the same situation. There are very few positions, but there are very few people. And being a journalist, it's like there are more people competing for those positions, and it's easier to be a journalist. Like you can take any short time training course or postdoc position which has all those techniques, and you can get trained easily within a year. But being a specialist cannot be done within a year. It takes time.
Mhm.
So it has both advantages and disadvantages.
So in the time that you've been in Mihong's lab at MIT, what was going through your mind in terms of how do you want to adjust or follow through in terms of the plan that you set for yourself at the end of your PhD? Like, what was the planning? What was your state of mind at that point? How did you essentially get to the San Diego?
So actually, what I didn't realize when I was changing my field, so that is a very high productive lab, and if you are changing a field, uh, basically you need some time to learn. You need some time to learn, and you need to adjust with the pace of the whole lab. So one thing I realized that like I I need to be in a place where basically I can give more time towards learning than producing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the reason I moved to San Diego. Like I think Francesca did not ask me for 6 months or 1 year what I am doing.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, so that gives you time to adjust. If you're not changing a field, then you can go immediately to
Mm-hmm.
any lab you want. But if you're changing a field, you may need some time to learn everything about that field and how things work in that area, something like that. So uh, that time I got in San Diego.
So
And
what was the
yeah, go ahead.
most favorite? What was the most favorite thing that you think you've done in San Diego besides obviously hanging out with lab mates such as myself?
uh, I love to walk in San Diego. Like it's nice, really nice weather. So you can have a long walk. You can go to the beach by walking. I used to go to lab sometime during the weekends. It's like around 3.5 miles. So I had to walk to lab sometimes during weekends if I needed to go to work.
Yeah. You
So
can't really
walking
do
is,
that in Boston, right?
yeah, in Boston you can't do that, and even in India it's too crowded, so it's not that easy. So that those long walks, and there's so many. I mean, San Diego is fun place.
Yeah.
So it has similar weather to India, like
So, uh-huh. Go ahead.
similar weather in some months in India. Like the weather right now is quite pleasant. So I
Yeah.
cannot say in summers.
Yeah. So, how did the time in San Diego inform your decision or your goal in terms of to pursue the position that you currently occupy?
So uh, the place where I am currently, like Banaras Hindu University, I did my bachelor's and master's from this university. And one very special thing about this place is like in not a big city. This is in a small city, but this is one of the top 5 universities in India. And I have seen many people who complete their journey from here. They want to come back to this university. There's something about that. So my goal, even from my PhD, was to come back to this university if I get a chance. So when I was in San Diego, I think during the end of second year, I realized that I am ready to move as independent person. And that discussion, like Francesca had that my discussion with me, and that made things clear. Like there is a time when you realize, okay, now you're ready. You can finish independent projects. You can conduct independent research. So I realized that now I think I should start applying. So I think I was planning to move to Europe for a couple of years so that I can come back to India and give interviews and go back. It's easier to travel from Europe than in US. So the plan was to go back to Europe and then apply in India and come back. But it worked faster. So I had applied for this position, I think 6 months or 7 months before I shifted. And then the interviews in these universities were being conducted during the time I was applying visa for Europe, and it worked out well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, since I was privy to some of those trials and tribulations of trying to go from Francesca's lab, sort of going over Europe and actually straight into the I guess the dream position that you always wanted, was super interesting. And obviously it just shows the power of strategic thinking and really going out there and having a plan and having a backup plan and a backup to a backup plan. I think this is one of the things that I admire most about you.
Yeah, so that I have done from long time. Like I prepare my timetables. It Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work. I change that, but I keep on doing that. I keep on thinking what I want to do next, and what if this does not work? I need to have a second plan.
Yeah,
I need to have a third plan. If that second plan does not work, I don't want to be in a situation where I don't have anything to do.
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect time to talk about what's happening in the world right now, which is obviously we're in the middle of the pandemic, which changes not just plans, it changes people's lives almost in an irreversible manner. So as a newly minted assistant professor, what is going on through your mind? Like, how are you adjusting and how do you plan for the future in times like this?
This is the time when people are getting a lot of time to introspect, to look within and to think about so many things. So as I mean, I think I taught for almost we completed a semester. We took the mid-sem exams, and then students were going back after mid-sem break, and it happened during that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have been sending teaching materials to students so that they can keep on reading the things they have to be taught and stuff. This time, I mean, there's a long list of things which has to be done, and some things, some movies and some series like Harry Potter I watched after a long time.
Nice.
Finally. So
we got to talk about it off the air for sure. I'm really curious about your opinion.
so but it's a lot of reading, basically, like the kind of research work I want to do in future, the kind of grants I want to apply, and what are the challenges which are what will be the challenges in funding situations in future.
Yeah.
So you have to think about a lot of things. So
this is a perfect time for me to ask the question. I know you're a very big advocate for increasing more academic research funding. So it's very interesting for me to ask, so why do you think, and this is your time to maybe give like a sales pitch or sort of your opinion really on the funding situation in academic research, and how does the situation that we currently live in now really change or should change the funding that we have right now?
So there are some observations which I can make. Like, I mean, in India, we are able to do testing because we have people who are expert in those kind of things. So this is the result of long time investment in research and development. You cannot have things done overnight. Like, people are asking immediately, vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. It cannot come overnight. It cannot come within a short span of time. So research takes long training. Long. It's a time taking thing. So if you have good amount of funding, and if you can attract best people in research by making it lucrative enough, giving good jobs, giving good facilities, you will have best people working on challenging problems. So if you think about the money of if you think about how much money we have lost due to this global lockdown, it's huge. So I was reading one article, I don't know how correct is that, but basically the amount of bail package which has been given recently by US is the amount of total biomedical funding from 1986 till now.
Oh, wow.
So, and if in last 5 years there has been funding cuts in all over the world. It's not the problem of only uh, India or any specific country. All over the world, there has been cut in research funding. So we need to focus on our priorities. What is more essential for life?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we need to increase funding in research, especially government-funded research, because it pays in long term. It may not pay immediately. Like right now, people may say that, okay, we don't have anything against COVID-19 or coronavirus. But if you think, I mean, people, the scientists are doing all the tests. We are able to do the test because people are trained in RT-PCR.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very common technique. But if you have not invested enough, I mean, you will not have enough trained people. The good people are leaving academia. They are going to industry, or they are not going in research at all. It's a long route.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep on reducing the funds, it's not going to be a very good situation when you need it the most, like the situation right now.
Yeah. So I was planning on making another video, and you'll probably see it soon on the channel, which talks about the implications of COVID-19 when it comes to academic research. And one of the things I was planning on talking about a little bit is what's the focus that we see right now in terms of the public's perception of the contributions. And what I mean by that, it seems like academic research sort of is stolen, or rather was stolen from the spotlight by all the pharmaceutical companies, which are now running the clinical trials or developing the vaccines and so on and so forth, which is sort of running against what we really hope to achieve, is actually give more money to basic academic research.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so there is difference between like society here and society in US. At least I appreciated that people in US valued scientists more than people in India.
Oh.
It cannot be generalized, but overall, the amount, like the number of interactions I had in US and in India, it's very difficult, or it's not that easy to convince people to go in science,
Mm-hmm.
for the career prospects. So, and society in general values scientists more in Western world, and because they have seen the benefits in long term. So, what people don't realize, or what I think what is not being communicated effectively, is that any kind of vaccine development of any kind of breakthrough depends on the long time research which was done by people in academics. It's like 20-30 years of research, and those research is taken into account to develop any product. So that work people don't pay attention to. That if that work was not there, it will not be easy to do things immediately. All the research cannot be done by one company, or people in one company. They cannot go from zero to the final stage. There has been a lot of background work which was done by people in academics or government funded institutions. And that work forms the foundation of any kind of breakthrough in industry. So that foundation goes unnoticed most of the time. People see, and out of the many claims, I have seen many claims, but how many of those claims came to the final conclusion? We are still waiting for a final conclusion. So since it's more attractive for companies to make the case, and it will be good if anyone comes with a vaccine. There should be, a healthy competition. I'm not against that, but I think most of the companies make big claims. Then it takes time to prove things. It cannot be done immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap things up for this episode, I guess my biggest question to you, Chandan, is we have some listeners who are early career professionals, both on the academic side or maybe transitioning into the industry. What was some of the life advice that you've gotten over your academic career, and some of the tips that you think have helped you to become and to achieve the things that you have and be in a position that you're in this sort of dream job that you always envisioned for yourself?
So, like, if you asked me like 10 or 15 years back, or when I was in my PhD, if you asked me back then, I would not say that I will get this position, because it's in a small city, but the competition is huge, literally huge. So I would say one of the most important things is to be clear in what you want. If you want to go to industry, be clear right from the beginning that you want to go to industry. If you want to go to academics, be clear about that. Ask difficult questions to yourself, and focus totally on you. Don't think about anything or anything else. Think about your own interest, because it's a long span of time. It's 5 years or 10 years of time investment. So you have to think about yourself, and you have to think at least 2 years, 3 years ahead of the time. Like, if you do this, what will be your situation in 2 years or 3 years? And what if one thing does not work? Do you have a backup?
Yeah.
So always, early, especially people in early career, they should start looking in job scenario, and they should start looking in the skills they want. Like, if someone is transitioning or willing to transition in industry, they should start looking for the positions, and start looking for the expertise they are asking, so that they can plan for that. It will not be overnight that you will be trained in a technique which you have not learned. So I think thinking ahead helps a lot, and having plans.
Yeah.
What makes it more difficult most of the time, if we get in a comfortable situation, we are kind of happy with that situation, and everyone, who want to push themselves in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So I think being in a difficult situation helps you. It will so it will be like a headache for some time, but in long term, you will save a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can apply those shortcuts.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So speaking of one last question, and before we wrap up, speaking of planning ahead, I know the answer to the question, but I think it's worth asking. Would you like to do another PhD, and what would you want to specialize in?
Oh, so I have been a huge fan of literature, like Hindi literature, English literature. And in fact, I have that plan. If I have to do another PhD, it will be in Hindi literature for sure.
Well, I think this is a 30-year-old thinking ahead, basically.
Yeah, literature is very close to my heart, and I'm very happy to see the new literature coming in Hindi, basically.
Wow.
So
I look forward to reading that dissertation.
Yeah, definitely. After some time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chandan, for your time. It's been a pleasure to having you here on Biofilm Podcast.
Thank you very much, Pavel, for inviting me.